Hello, this is Jessica Pettit, and who do I have the pleasure of interviewing today?
My name is Altaira Hatton, and you can find me on altairahatton.com and conflicttools.com.
Conflicttools.com. What is fun about Altaira is that we met moments before she left the United States to go to yet another mediation-related training organization thing, and this is the first time I've gotten to talk to her in way too long. We basically just Facebook talked to each other.
So true.
But it's worth it, and let me show you why. So we're going to start off first with two open-ended questions. There's no wrong answer, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are from your perspective because everybody's lens is different. So first question is on the concept of diversity dividend. So this usually comes up on my side of like, what's the profits of doing diversity work? And even possibly we were just talking about getting paid in doing this work, whatever. You can go wherever you want to, but in thinking about diversity dividend with investment, action, and return in mind, what does that mean for you?
That's such a good question. Wow. You started with a doozy. Thank you. There's things I actually heard that I hear that terminology most often from my clients. I hear it most often in the rationale for why diversity training makes sense or why they should increase diversity in their workforce. And you can probably hear the sarcasm starting to increase in my voice as I say this, because it's just something that I can't really look at it in terms of the justification method. You can't look at diversity as something you're going to say, oh, look, we've made more profits because we have a more diverse workforce. Or, oh, look, we better represent our clients or our consumers because we have a more diverse workforce. And that kind of concept of being able to attach dollar amount to something that is a basic function of building community and having a community both in our work environments and our personal environments and our lived spaces that we actually want to be in and actually is equal and equitable. Those are things you can add a number to. You can attach a number to that. So whenever I hear that particular terminology, I kind of cringe. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but that's my first response.
Great. So the other open-ended no wrong answer is asterisk other duties assigned. So these may be things given to you or these may be things that you take on yourself. What does the asterisk other duties assigned mean to you?
Tell me more about the context of that. Do you mean in terms of my personal work or I'm doing actual diversity and inclusion training, or how do you mean that?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a human navigating organizations, I'm willing to bet you've been given or you've taken on other duties assigned. It could be anything, right? Like, I think that, again, referencing the conversation we had before I hit record, there's organizations that I do work with that I'm not being paid for or monetarily thanked for in some way for the hours and labor, but like I'm doing it because I feel like I need to be doing this.
Right.
So there are other duties assigned that I'm giving myself.
Mm-hmm.
There are also, like, when I did work in an office where I was the IT department, whether I liked it or not, and another woman in the office was the person who made all the cupcakes for all the birthday parties. That was not part of her job description.
That's really funny.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like emotional labor, right? It could mean anything.
Yeah.
Duties assigned.
Okay, I was thinking of the emotional labor part of it because I find it interesting. Now, my first title is mediator. And so when I go into other spaces, people look at me as a mediator, and there's a big confusion of mediator versus therapist. And so oftentimes there's just sort of this like emotional labor assigned to me that people think falls into my main professional category. So for example, if I go in and do a diversity and inclusion training, or even just a consultation, and I've done this a couple of times, like the very entry level consultation, people will then go into like interpersonal spats that they're having with colleagues. And it's like, well, okay, that's not actually in the category of diversity and inclusion training. But thank you for bringing up, this is obviously an important emotional issue for you, but it's in no way part of what I'm there to do. I joke about sometimes saying mediator is a good thing in a group of people, and sometimes it's opening the door for everyone to tell you their personal problems, which can be very funny. Thankfully, I'm not typically the person who's assigned cupcakes in any kind of corporate environment. And it's interesting because I think disability plays an interesting role in that. And that when people hire me, even as a consultant, there's a lot of concerns about what I can't do. And so, and people obviously think there's more I can't do than I actually cannot do. So I find that the job description for me is very often stuck to very closely. People are much less likely to throw on the extra stuff, which is a blessing in disguise, right? Like on one side, it's discriminatory bias. And on the other side, it's like, well, they're not going to hand me the extra, like, you know, picking the 50-pound paper boxes up and down the stairs because I can't. So, or making cupcakes. So it's, benefits are hidden in everything.
It's incredible when in doing these interviews with people with different visible physical disabilities, that pattern. And as I've gotten to know them or get to know them even better, I have yet to interview anybody with a physical disability who was not able to do something they decided they wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's the hidden.
You might have to figure out like a workaround, but you want to do it, it's going to get done.
Yeah. And I always wonder, you know, my personal bias is that I wonder, like, is creativity and problem solving like exclusively the domain of the disabled? You know? Because it seems like people without a disability have no concept that exists. So, yeah, when I'm thinking about reverse bias, I often consider that maybe we have a special talent that's exclusive.
Well, to kind of transition to your work, in the pre-conversations that we've had, one of the things that stood up as the most unique based on the other interviews that I've done is your strong focus on corporate culture, be it cluster hires, peer support, things like this. But as a mediator from that particular perspective, what's it mean to have intra-organizational mediations? That's a lot of word salad to people who don't understand what all it is that you do. So can you open that up and let us know what you do and how that's relevant in some of the ways of diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Okay, great. I'll start with the inter-organizational mediations. Basically, I'm frequently brought into organizations, be they for-profit or nonprofit, that have some kind of broken corporate culture. And so the mediation comes out typically because of an HR-related dispute. And before they go before a judge or an arbitrator, they choose to hire a mediator, me, to help them work through kind of the dynamics and the issues there. And what I often find is that you'll have two people that say, oh, we have this problem with each other, but actually it's not those two people. The entire organization has that problem going on. And those two people just brought it to a head. So very frequently, when I'm brought in as a mediator, I go from having two people on a mediation to then having 20 or 30. I don't usually do more than 40, that's kind of my limit. But when you have a large organization, you often have the exact same dynamics in all the different roles. And coming from that kind of knowledge and background, because at this point I've done a ton of this, when I go in and talking about diversity and inclusion work, and especially in equity building, I talk about how you build corporate culture and what kind of things you put in place to prevent those kind of breaks from happening and that kind of like cultural dysfunction from being created. And kind of what you do when you have new hires to bring them on and create a supportive, nurturing culture of like inclusion, rather than a lot of the kind of common issues that come up where new hires will feel ostracized or separated. And when you have people coming in that are from minority backgrounds, that can be just exacerbated. So.
That's amazing. And I think that what I love about what I've learned from you in stalking you on Facebook over these years of your absence of leaving the country, I'm still not over that, is that where the tools of mediation, I had always looked at them as ways of kind of simmering things down, slowing it down. The people in the room already know the answers. And there is some correlation to that kind of to DEI work. But what I love about what you do is that it's not two people. Mm-hmm. It's an organizational cultural issue, and you still get to use the same mediation skills because they do still actually know the answers. I just love that, and it never even dawned on me in using the skills in that way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Do you notice any particular patterns that come up around kind of what you call the cluster hires or peer support that also kind of help bridge that gap?
That's a great question. I think first I should say that because of exactly what you described in terms of looking at mediation, starting off looking at mediation as being a single conflict kind of resolution technique, and now looking at it as kind of communication skills, which is where I got to conflict tools from. I now look at it as the kind of basic tools of mediation that everyone can access. And so if you have like a larger group that has levels of dysfunction or is building culture from the ground up, having access to those tools and thinking about them as like a toolkit that you bring out for every meeting and every new hire really helps a lot. So I've started doing trainings with groups of people and doing the conflict tool training, often for entire corporations, but by group. So that kind of segues into it really well. I think in terms of having specific issues that come up with cluster hires, I mean, I have to say that at this point, I think a lot of diversity and inclusion work is still kind of in the buzzword kind of stage. We're still very much in the like large corporations saying, oh, we need a D&I specialist to come in and help us with this new form of hiring. I haven't heard a lot of people on the kind of 5-year or 10-year other side of that experience. I have heard of a lot of kind of internal resistance, especially around minority-focused cluster hires, where older corporate cultures will then be kind of affronted by the idea that they're changing the hiring method, and people feel like they've lost something or they're losing something. But what I really want to hear, what I haven't heard, and kind of the data collection that's in the back of my mind running, is from those people who were hired in those groups or who had specific types of entry support. I want to hear their career path in 5 years. I want to hear their career path in 10 years and kind of how that works, because I think a lot of this is still in the buzzword phase. And I'm just not seeing the data on the other side of it.
Oh, I can't wait to read that too. Great. Thanks. Are you ready for my 2 favorite questions?
Sure.
So favorite question number 1 is, what have you changed your mind about lately?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so unrelated to our conversation. Okay. Human connection, actually, which is so funny. I went to this global leadership conference this past weekend called Hive, which is actually something you should join and come to next year, because you will love it. These are your people. Basically, it's a group of global leaders who focus on how to change the world in kind of thought-provoking and kind ways. So be it like, social enterprise or NGO startup, or people who do doing good for better, which is the kind of model of making money and donating it to causes. So everybody is basically on the same track of like, let's make this a better place to live, and coming at it from very different points. And I love, we have this Designing Your Life workshop that we do every year. And it's, I'm sure you're familiar with the methods, but it's basically looking at your life and saying, what am I good at? What lights me on fire? What am I passionate about? And what does the world need of those skills? How can I contribute that? And that's kind of a very short version of it. But one of the aspects of this year's conference was actually this human connection workshop, which I found really pushed a lot of my boundaries. And so I've really changed kind of how I think about like touch and like eye contact in kind of corporate or like non-intimate settings, I guess, like social settings or corporate settings. Because I really found the outcome for me at that workshop was that I was so much more open-hearted to people after I had gone through like the 3 or 4 exercises, which were the cutest things. Like you just kind of walked around the room and looked in people's eyes and touched their hands, and it was very new agey and hippie. But in my mediations, I often ask people not to touch each other and kind of like give a certain amount of physical distance. And I completely upended my whole thinking on that. So.
Wow, that's really cool. What do you absolutely know?
Oh, what do I absolutely know? That I am unbelievably lucky. I have an amazing life. Yeah, yay.
Oh, that's a pretty good one. Okay, so as you know, you picked 3 random numbers for my icebreaker cards, so they could be easy, intermediate, or deep. And okay. This is the lightning round. Ooh. So your first one is number 5. If you choose a celebrity to play you in the movie of your life, who would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. Janine Garofalo.
Oh, perfect.
She's got that lovely dark side. I think she'd appreciate my life.
Yeah, she's not as funny as you, but she's close.
Oh, thank you.
She'll do. Okay, number 13, also easy. What is the story behind your name, legal preferred and or a nickname?
I was named by hippies. My parents were into astronomy. I'm actually named after a star in the constellation Aquila, Altair. And so the summer triangle is Alta, Vega, and Deneb. And Altair, I think, is the second brightest star in the summer sky. That's me.
That's awesome. Okay, last one, 22, intermediate. What is something that has happened in your life that has defined who you are?
The decision not to go to law school and to go into mediation instead. Major shift of my life plan. I think it was a great one. Thank you for letting me know.
Wow, that's very cool. Well, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
I refer them to altairahatton.com or conflicttools.com. They can also stalk me on the IG, Twitter, Facebook, social media.
I recommend the Facebook. There's lots of pictures. Excellent. Well, thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.